Servius Sulpicius Galba, born on December 24th, 03 BC, in the noble patrician family of the Sulpici, would come to occupy the Roman imperial throne at one of the most turbulent moments in the empire's history. Unlike Nero, whose reign had been marked by extravagance, scandal, and artistic indulgence, Galba's early life and career were defined by discipline, austerity, and military rigor. From his youth, he demonstrated a keen understanding of Roman politics and administration, combined with a resolute commitment to the traditional values of the Republic, though he would eventually wield them under the guise of imperial authority. His family was of ancient Roman heritage, and the Sulpici had long been associated with political service in the Senate. Galba's upbringing instilled in him a strong sense of duty, the importance of public honor, and the necessity of decisive action in moments of crisis. Galba's early career followed the cursus honorum, the sequence of public offices that formed the backbone of Roman political life. He served as quaestor, tribune, and praetor, gaining experience in both civil administration and military command. This dual experience would shape his later policies as emperor. Galba was not a man of flamboyant rhetoric or theatrical display. Rather, he relied on reputation, competence, and the disciplined loyalty of soldiers. He cultivated strong connections within the legions, particularly those stationed in Hispania Tarraconensis, where he would later command armies. His reputation among troops and provincial administrators was one of fairness, integrity, and reliability, qualities that would later become critical in the chaotic events following Nero's demise. The final years of Nero's reign set the stage for Galba's rise. By 67 AD, Nero's rule had become increasingly unstable. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, his extravagant construction projects like the Domus Aurea, the persecution of Christians, and his obsession with artistic performances alienated both the Senate and the provincial armies. While Nero remained popular with the urban masses who attended his games and performances, the upper classes and military leaders perceived a ruler more focused on personal indulgence than the welfare of the empire. Provincial governors, including Galba, observed these developments with growing concern. Many feared that Nero's reign had weakened Rome's political structure, leaving the empire vulnerable to rebellion, unrest, and civil strife. Galba's strategic position in Hispania was crucial. Hispania Tarraconensis was a wealthy and militarily significant province, and Galba's governance there reflected his pragmatic style. He maintained discipline among the legions, ensured the collection of taxes, and cultivated loyalty among provincial elites. Unlike Nero, who often mismanaged resources or resorted to arbitrary confiscations, Galba implemented policies designed to maintain long-term stability. His reputation for integrity and discipline earned him admiration from both soldiers and local administrators. When news of Nero's increasing unpopularity reached him, Galba quietly began to position himself as a viable alternative for leadership. Although initially he acted with caution, mindful of the risks inherent in open opposition to the emperor. The catalyst for Galba's eventual rise to power was the revolt of Gaius Julius Vindex in Gaul in 68 A. Vindex, the governor of Gallia Lugdunensis, openly rebelled against Nero's rule, citing the emperor's tyranny, fiscal mismanagement, and moral corruption. Vindex's rebellion was a direct challenge to imperial authority, and although it was quickly suppressed by forces loyal to Rome, it demonstrated the fragility of Nero's position. Observing Vindex's actions, Galba recognized that the time for cautious observation was over. In early June 68 AD, he declared himself the legate of the Senate and people of Rome, effectively claiming the imperial mantle. Galba's decision was calculated and rooted in a belief that his disciplined leadership, combined with widespread dissatisfaction with Nero, could stabilize the empire. Galba's personality as a leader was markedly different from his predecessors. He was austere, frugal, and often harsh in his judgments. He believed that moral integrity, military competence, and adherence to Roman law were paramount. Unlike Nero, whose reign had been characterized by lavish spending and artistic self-indulgence, Galba presented himself as a sober, pragmatic ruler who would restore order to a fractured empire. These qualities endeared him to the Senate and the legions, particularly those stationed in Spain and parts of Gaul, who valued stability and predictability after years of Nero's capricious rule. Despite his strengths, Galba faced significant challenges even before ascending to Rome. The legions of Germania and the eastern provinces remained loyal to the idea of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, and there was widespread uncertainty about whether a provincial governor could assert authority over the heart of the empire. Furthermore, Galba's personality, while admired for discipline, also made him rigid, impatient with dissent, and uncompromising. These traits would later contribute to his difficulties in maintaining authority once he assumed power. Galba's path to the throne also illustrates the complex political dynamics of the Roman Empire during moments of transition. Imperial power depended not only on legal authority, but also on the loyalty of the Senate, the Praetorian Guard, and provincial armies. By declaring himself emperor, Galba effectively challenged Nero's legitimacy and tested the allegiance of key military forces. His decision reflected both political acumen and calculated risk-taking. He understood that timing was crucial, that any delay might allow rivals or loyalist forces to consolidate, and that decisive action was necessary to claim authority. As Galba moved toward Rome, his reputation preceded him. Letters and messengers spread news of his intentions, rallying support among disaffected senators and generals. In the provinces, the announcement of Nero's downfall and Galba's claim inspired hope among those seeking stability. Yet, the transition was fraught with danger. The imperial capital remained loyal to the memory of Nero, and factions within the city, including members of the Praetorian Guard, were uncertain where their loyalties lay. Galba's success would depend not only on his military strength, but also on his ability to navigate the treacherous political landscape of Rome itself. By the time Galba entered the city, the stage was set for a rapid transformation of power. The Senate, eager to rid Rome of Nero's mismanagement, formally recognized Galba as emperor, marking a rare instance in Roman history, where a provincial governor successfully claimed the throne without an initial civil war in the capital. Galba's ascension, however, would not be without challenges. The very qualities that made him a disciplined and respected leader, rigor, austerity, and uncompromising morality, also alienated allies who expected favors, gifts, or leniency. These tensions would shape the remainder of his brief reign. Galba's rise illustrates a pivotal moment in Roman history, where the empire transitioned from the extravagant tyranny of Nero to a brief experiment in disciplined, austere governance. His early career, military expertise, and administrative competence provided the foundation for his claim to power. But the political realities of Rome, including the expectations of the Senate and the volatility of the Praetorian Guard, would test his leadership at every turn. In many ways, Galba's story serves as a case study in the challenges of succession, legitimacy, and authority within the Roman imperial system, highlighting the delicate balance between military support, senatorial approval, and popular acceptance. After being formally recognized by the Senate as emperor in June 68 AD, Servius Sulpicius Galba entered Rome under a complex mixture of anticipation, respect, and uncertainty. His reputation as a disciplined, austere, and morally upright leader preceded him, and many in the Senate and provincial administration welcomed the promise of stability after the chaos and extravagance of Nero's reign. Yet, while Galba's ascension represented a rare moment of orderly transition from one emperor to the next, it also set the stage for immediate challenges. His rigid temperament and uncompromising approach, which had earned him respect in Hispania, now began to reveal the difficulties inherent in governing the imperial capital and managing the expectations of a diverse, politically charged population. Galba's first actions as emperor reflected his commitment to austerity, discipline, and the restoration of traditional Roman values. He reduced extravagant spending in the imperial treasury, reversed some of Nero's costly building projects, and emphasized frugality in court ceremonies. Galba also sought to demonstrate impartiality and justice in his administration. He implemented strict oversight of provincial governors, emphasizing accountability and the rule of law. These measures were popular among senators and administrators who had grown weary of Nero's unpredictability and favoritism, but they were less well received by the urban populace and the Praetorian Guard, who had become accustomed to Nero's largesse and entertainment-focused governance. One of Galba's most controversial decisions involved financial reforms and fiscal discipline. The empire's treasury, depleted by Nero's lavish spending on palaces, games, and artistic projects, required careful management. Galba enforced strict taxation policies, recovered previously misappropriated funds, and limited handouts to the people of Rome. While these measures were financially prudent, they alienated segments of the population who expected continued largesse, free grain distributions, and public spectacles. Similarly, the Praetorian Guard, which had grown accustomed to bonuses and favors under previous emperors, found Galba's austerity measures unpalatable. His refusal to grant the customary donative, a bonus given to soldiers upon a new emperor's accession, created resentment that would later play a critical role in his downfall. Galba's approach to governance, though principled, highlighted a recurring tension in Roman imperial politics: the balance between moral authority and political pragmatism. While he sought to restore traditional values and legal order, he underestimated the degree to which personal loyalty, patronage, and financial incentives influenced the allegiance of both the military and urban citizens. His strictness, which had served him well in provincial administration, clashed with the expectations of Rome's entrenched political and military elites. In this sense, Galba's short reign became a lesson in the complexities of leadership, demonstrating that integrity alone, without careful attention to alliances and incentives, could leave even a legitimate ruler vulnerable. During this period, Galba also faced the challenge of consolidating his power across the provinces. While many governors recognized him as emperor, there were pockets of resistance and uncertainty, particularly in regions loyal to the memory of Nero or those controlled by ambitious generals. Galba dispatched trusted officials and legates to secure allegiance, restore order, and monitor potential uprisings. His careful management of provincial affairs reflected both military prudence and administrative competence. But the process was slow, and rumors of discontent and conspiracy began to circulate in Rome. Meanwhile, Galba's relationship with the Senate was complex. Senators appreciated his discipline and moral rectitude, yet some found him harsh, inflexible, and intolerant of dissent. Galba's preference for austerity and merit over political patronage alienated individuals who had expected favors, rewards, or positions of influence under a new emperor. This growing disaffection among the elite, combined with the dissatisfaction of the Praetorian Guard and the urban masses, created an environment in which conspiracies could take root. Although Galba's rule was legally sanctioned and initially welcomed, the combination of high expectations, harsh enforcement of discipline, and unmet demands set the stage for instability. In addition to internal political challenges, Galba faced immediate external threats. The empire's frontiers were vast, and Roman legions stationed in Germania, Britain, and the East required attentive oversight. Although Galba had earned loyalty in Hispania, he needed to secure support among commanders in distant provinces, some of whom had loyalties that shifted depending on political opportunity. The fragile balance of military power meant that even a single rebellion in a distant province could cascade into a larger crisis if not addressed promptly. Galba's reliance on discipline, rather than personal charisma or largesse, made him vulnerable in this regard, as soldiers often preferred leaders who could provide both authority and tangible rewards. Despite these challenges, Galba attempted to govern with dignity and moral purpose. He reasserted senatorial authority, curtailed corruption, and sought to restore respect for Roman law. In public speeches, he emphasized justice, accountability, and the need to protect the empire from the excesses that had characterized Nero's reign. For a brief period, there was hope that the empire might stabilize under his leadership. However, the combination of high expectations, entrenched political interests, and the human desire for reward and recognition created tensions that would soon become insurmountable. By late 68 AD, murmurs of dissent were growing. Soldiers of the Praetorian Guard, angered by the lack of donatives and bonuses, began to seek alternative leaders who could satisfy their demands. In the provinces, ambitious commanders observed Galba's strictness with apprehension, while in Rome, senators and officials began to question whether the emperor's moral rigor could be sustained alongside the practical demands of rule. These tensions were compounded by Galba's advancing age. He was 70 years old at the time of his accession, and his reputation for rigidity, which discouraged compromise and alliance building. Galba's short reign demonstrates the fragile nature of imperial power in Rome, particularly during periods of transition. Legal authority and moral integrity, while valuable, were insufficient to guarantee political stability when expectations of reward and loyalty went unmet. Galba's insistence on austerity and discipline, though principled, created dissatisfaction among key groups whose support was essential for maintaining power. As his rule progressed, the emperor found himself increasingly isolated, relying on formal authority rather than the personal bonds and incentives that had traditionally underpinned loyalty in the Roman Empire. The early months of Galba's reign, therefore, are marked by a tension between order and discontent, between principled leadership and the practical realities of imperial politics. His story underscores the challenges faced by any ruler attempting to navigate a transition from one regime to another, particularly when the previous ruler's excesses have created expectations that are difficult to reconcile with disciplined governance. In the coming months, these tensions would escalate, ultimately shaping the events that would lead to Galba's dramatic and violent end, and demonstrating the volatility of power in the Roman Empire during the year of the four emperors. As the summer of 68 AD progressed, Servius Sulpicius Galba's reign, though initially welcomed for its promise of discipline and moral rectitude, began to unravel amid political intrigue and growing resentment from multiple quarters. The very qualities that had propelled Galba to power rigor, austerity, and a strict sense of justice also alienated key factions within Rome, including the Praetorian Guard, ambitious senators, and would-be claimants to the throne. Galba's reliance on formal authority over personal loyalty created a fragile network of support, one easily destabilized by opportunists and conspirators seeking to exploit dissatisfaction for their own gain. One of the earliest sources of tension came from the Praetorian Guard, whose loyalty was vital to any emperor's security. Historically, the Guard had been accustomed to receiving generous donatives and other rewards from a new ruler as a demonstration of goodwill and recognition of their crucial role in imperial succession. Galba, adhering to his principles of austerity and disciplined governance, refused to provide the customary donative to the soldiers. This decision, though consistent with his lifelong commitment to frugality, was interpreted as an affront to the Guard's expectations and to their status within the imperial system. Discontent among these elite troops grew rapidly, creating an atmosphere ripe for conspiracy. Meanwhile, ambitious figures within Rome observed the unfolding discontent with keen interest. Among them was Marcus Salvius Otho, a wealthy and well-connected nobleman who had initially supported Galba's accession. Otho had hoped that his loyalty would be rewarded with a prominent position in the new administration or substantial financial favor. Galba's rigid and uncompromising character, however, left little room for political patronage or indulgence, and Otho found himself sidelined and humiliated. His resentment, combined with the disaffection of the Praetorian Guard, created a powerful coalition ready to act against the emperor. Galba's position was further weakened by the perception of his advancing age and the absence of a designated heir. At 70 years old, Galba was already older than most of his contemporaries in the political sphere, and he showed no clear plan for succession. This uncertainty encouraged speculation, rumors, and plotting among ambitious senators and military leaders who feared that the empire might lapse into disorder upon his death. The lack of a strong successor or a formalized succession plan left Galba politically vulnerable, particularly in a period when the stability of imperial authority depended as much on perception and loyalty as on legal recognition. The conspiracy against Galba gained momentum in early 69 Otho, aligning with disaffected elements of the Praetorian Guard, orchestrated a coup to seize power. While Galba remained in the palace, relying on formal authority and legal recognition from the Senate, Otho and his supporters worked quietly to secure the loyalty of key military units. The conspirators exploited the emperor's unpopularity, the resentment over withheld bonuses, and his austere governance to build a coalition willing to risk rebellion. The atmosphere in Rome grew increasingly tense as rumors of impending action circulated among citizens, soldiers, and senators alike. Despite growing warnings and signs of unrest, Galba underestimated the threat posed by Otho and the disaffected guard. His rigid adherence to principle, combined with the distrust of flattery or manipulation, prevented him from taking decisive preventative measures. Instead of negotiating or offering concessions to key factions, Galba relied on the authority of the Senate and his own record of discipline, believing that legitimacy and moral authority would suffice to secure loyalty. This miscalculation proved fatal, as political loyalty in Rome had always been fluid and contingent upon tangible rewards, patronage, and personal bonds. The critical moment came on January 15, 69 A. The Praetorian Guard, led by conspirators aligned with Otho, surrounded the imperial palace and demanded the emperor's abdication. Galba, steadfast in his principles, refused to yield. His advisors attempted to persuade him to escape or negotiate, but he remained resolute, determined to maintain authority and demonstrate courage in the face of treachery. This decision reflected both his personal integrity and his inability to navigate the political pragmatism required for survival. The Guard, unmoved by appeals to principle, advanced, and the emperor's isolation became tragically apparent. In a swift and brutal sequence, Galba was assassinated in the Forum, stabbed by members of the Praetorian Guard who had once been tasked with his protection. Historical accounts describe the scene as chaotic, with senators and citizens witnessing the violent end of a leader who had sought to restore discipline and moral order. His body, stripped of imperial insignia, symbolized the collapse of authority and the vulnerability of even the most principled ruler in the treacherous environment of Roman politics. Galba's assassination marked not only the end of his brief reign, but also the continuation of a period of instability that would soon engulf the empire in the turmoil of the Year of the Four Emperors. Galba's fall underscores the precarious nature of Roman imperial power, where legal legitimacy and moral authority were often insufficient to maintain control without the support of the military and political elites. His austerity and commitment to principle, admirable in many respects, left him isolated and unable to respond effectively to the practical demands of leadership. The conspirators, motivated by personal ambition and opportunism, capitalized on widespread dissatisfaction, demonstrating that power in Rome depended on perception, reward, and loyalty as much as on competence or integrity. In historical retrospect, Galba's reign, though brief, provides a vivid example of the challenges faced by emperors navigating the transition of power during periods of crisis. His life illustrates the tension between principle and pragmatism, morality and political necessity, and the enduring volatility of Rome's imperial system. The events surrounding his assassination set the stage for Otho's brief ascension, continuing the chain of rapid political change and civil unrest that defined the turbulent year following Nero's death. Galba's legacy, while overshadowed by his violent end, offers a cautionary tale about the fragile balance of authority, loyalty. The assassination of Galba on January 15, 69 AD, immediately propelled Marcus Salvius Otho to power, marking a dramatic continuation of the political upheaval that had begun with Nero's fall. Galba's death, though swift, had profound implications for the stability of the Roman Empire and the nature of imperial succession. The rapid transition underscored the fragility of authority in Rome, demonstrating how a ruler's personal qualities, integrity, discipline, or austerity could be insufficient to command loyalty in a volatile political landscape dominated by military influence, ambition, and opportunism. Galba's reign, though brief, left a mixed legacy. On the one hand, his commitment to fiscal responsibility, administrative discipline, and moral governance set a standard for principled leadership. He sought to restore the authority of the Senate, reduce corruption, and impose accountability on provincial governors. These reforms, if given time, might have contributed to longer-term stability and a return to orderly governance after the excesses of Nero. On the other hand, Galba's austere and uncompromising nature alienated key stakeholders, particularly the Praetorian Guard and influential senators accustomed to favor, patronage, and personal reward. This tension between principle and pragmatism ultimately defined his failure and serves as a critical lesson in the precariousness of Roman political power. The succession of Otho, a man of charm, ambition, and opportunistic intelligence, highlighted the volatility created by Galba's approach. Otho had initially supported Galba, but resentment over being overlooked for awards and positions, coupled with the guard's dissatisfaction, motivated him to seize power. His swift rise demonstrated that authority in Rome depended as much on perception, personal loyalty, and timely action as on legal legitimacy or moral rectitude. Galba's assassination thus became a turning point, emphasizing the critical role of military forces, especially the Praetorian Guard, in determining imperial succession. Galba's brief reign also revealed the broader challenges facing Rome during the year of the four emperors. The rapid turnover of emperors Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian illustrated the instability inherent in the empire when succession was uncertain and loyalties were fragmented. Each transition carried the potential for civil war, rebellion, and widespread disruption. Galba's failure to secure enduring alliances or to offer incentives to key factions made his rule particularly vulnerable, and his death catalyzed the chain of events that would plunge the empire into months of political and military turmoil. Despite his tragic end, Galba's life and actions offer insight into the complex dynamics of Roman imperial rule. His dedication to moral governance, discipline, and accountability reflected a genuine desire to stabilize the empire and restore traditional values. Yet, in a system where power was contingent on the support of soldiers, influential families, and political allies, these qualities were insufficient to protect him. Galba's assassination demonstrated that the exercise of authority required both principle and strategic engagement with the realities of Roman political culture. Historical accounts often portray Galba as austere and inflexible, yet he was also a man shaped by the demands of a career spent navigating the Senate, provincial administration, and military command. His decisions, whether in Hispania Tarraconensis or in Rome itself, reflected a consistent philosophy of duty, discipline, and moral responsibility. While his approach ultimately failed to secure his position, it set him apart from more flamboyant or indulgent rulers, offering a contrast to Nero's excesses and Otho's opportunism. In this sense, Galba's legacy is a study in the tension between virtue and practicality within the highest echelons of power. The assassination of Galba also had immediate repercussions for the governance of Rome. the sudden change in leadership disrupted administrative continuity and created uncertainty in both provincial governance and military operations. Governors, generals, and local authorities were forced to reassess their loyalties and adapt to a rapidly shifting political landscape. The instability emphasized the fragility of imperial structures when succession lacked clear mechanisms or widely accepted legitimacy. This period illustrated that the Roman Empire, despite its size and organizational complexity, remained highly sensitive to the ambitions and dissatisfaction of individual actors, particularly those with military power. In evaluating Galba's reign, historians often note the contrast between his moral intentions and his political naivety. He sought to restore dignity, justice, and fiscal prudence to the empire. But his neglect of personal loyalty, reward systems, and the expectations of influential groups left him isolated. The Praetorian Guard, in particular, proved decisive. Their willingness to act against the emperor highlighted the practical necessity of balancing principle with political pragmatism. Galba's failure demonstrates that even a ruler with integrity and administrative skill could fall if he misjudged the incentives and grievances of those around him. Ultimately, Galba's brief tenure as emperor offers a cautionary tale about leadership during periods of transition and instability. While his character embodied the virtues of discipline, moral integrity, and respect for law, his inability to navigate the practical realities of Roman political culture rendered him vulnerable to betrayal. His assassination by the very force tasked with protecting him underscores the precarious balance of power in Rome, where authority depended as much on strategic relationships and loyalty as on legal or moral right. Galba's story, though tragic, is essential to understanding the broader context of the Year of the Four Emperors. It illustrates how personal virtues, while admirable, must be coupled with strategic political action to secure power and maintain stability. His rise, brief rule, and violent death provide insight into the challenges faced by rulers navigating the complexities of imperial succession, the influence of the military, and the demands of an elite-driven political system. In the broader narrative of Roman history, Galba's reign stands as a pivotal episode, bridging the chaos of Nero's fall and the continuing turbulence that would define the empire in 69 AD. The assassination of Servius Sulpicius Galba marked the abrupt end of a reign that had promised to restore stability and moral authority to the Roman Empire, but instead became a cautionary tale of the fragility of power. Despite his brief tenure, Galba's life and leadership offer invaluable insights into the complexities of imperial governance, particularly during periods of crisis and succession. His rise from a disciplined provincial governor to the Emperor of Rome highlighted the importance of integrity, military competence, and administrative skill. Yet his fall underscored the perilous balance between principle and pragmatism in a political system dominated by military influence, elite ambitions, and popular expectations. Galba's primary legacy lies in his attempt to restore order after the chaos of Nero's reign. He emphasized fiscal responsibility, curtailed extravagant spending, and implemented stricter oversight of provincial governance. These policies reflected his commitment to justice, law, and the traditional values of the Roman Republic, which he sought to uphold even within the framework of imperial authority. By prioritizing discipline and accountability, Galba set a standard for principled leadership that, while ultimately unsuccessful in his own time, would serve as a reference point for later emperors who wished to project moral and administrative competence. However, Galba's rigid adherence to austerity and principle revealed a critical flaw in his approach: the underestimation of the political and personal dynamics that underpin power in Rome. The Praetorian Guard, a force central to maintaining imperial authority, became alienated by his refusal to provide the customary donative, illustrating how even a morally upright ruler could falter if he failed to recognize the expectations and motivations of key supporters. Likewise, ambitious senators and courtiers, accustomed to political patronage and rewards under previous regimes, were disillusioned by Galba's inflexibility. This combination of military discontent and elite dissatisfaction created the conditions for betrayal, ultimately facilitating his assassination by those entrusted with his protection. The violent end of Galba's rule also highlights the challenges of succession during periods of uncertainty. At the time of his accession, he had no designated heir and failed to secure a clear line of continuity, leaving a vacuum that ambitious figures like Otho were eager to fill. His inability to manage the succession strategically exposed a fundamental truth about Roman imperial politics. Legitimacy and moral authority were insufficient to ensure stability without the active support of the military and influential elites. Galba's fall serves as a poignant reminder that leadership in Rome depended not only on virtue and competence, but also on political acumen, alliance building, and timely responsiveness to emerging threats. In the broader context of Roman history, Galba's brief reign functioned as a critical bridge between the decadence of Nero and the instability of the Year of the Four Emperors. His assassination accelerated the cycle of rapid successions, civil unrest, and political intrigue that characterized 69 AD, a year in which Otho, Vitellius, and ultimately Vespasian would each claim the imperial throne. This period demonstrated the fragility of centralized authority in the absence of strong personal bonds, military loyalty, and clear succession mechanisms. Galba's experience exemplifies how even the most disciplined and morally upright rulers could become casualties of Rome's volatile political landscape. Despite his failures, Galba earned a measure of respect from historians and later commentators for his commitment to principle and his efforts to restore administrative order. Unlike Nero, whose rule had been marked by indulgence, cruelty, and spectacle, Galba sought to govern with integrity and to impose accountability on those around him. While his austere methods and inability to navigate the complex realities of Roman politics contributed to his downfall, they also distinguish him as a leader who prioritized the long-term health of the empire over personal gain or popularity. His reign, though short-lived, serves as a study in the limits of moral authority in a political system defined by loyalty, ambition, and military influence. Galba's life and rule also provide lessons about the human dimensions of power. His steadfastness, courage, and commitment to principle offer an example of integrity and leadership, yet his failure to recognize the importance of alliances, incentives, and timely compromise demonstrates the practical realities of governance. In this sense, Galba embodies both the virtues and vulnerabilities of a ruler, attempting to navigate a system in which moral authority alone cannot secure loyalty or stability. His reign reminds us that leadership is a delicate balance between ethical vision and pragmatic politics, a lesson as relevant today as it was in the corridors of imperial Rome. Ultimately, Galba's legacy is a mixture of admiration and caution. He is remembered for his discipline, moral rigor, and attempts to restore order after Nero's excesses. But he is also remembered for the political naivety that left him vulnerable to betrayal. His assassination illustrates the inherent instability of Roman imperial succession and the critical role of military and elite support in sustaining power. Galba's story stands as a testament to the complexities of leadership, the consequences of underestimating political realities, and the enduring tension between virtue and pragmatism in the exercise of authority. In conclusion, the reign of Servius Sulpicius Galba, though brief and ultimately tragic, provides a vital chapter in the history of the Roman Empire. His rise demonstrated the potential for principled, disciplined leadership to emerge even in times of crisis, while his fall underscored the perils of rigid adherence to principle without strategic engagement with the political, military, and social dynamics of Rome. Galba's experience during the Year of the Four Emperors offers enduring lessons on power, loyalty, and the delicate balance required to govern one of history's most formidable empires.